Hey guys, tonight we're travelling back to a time before air conditioning existed, when surviving summer was one of the greatest challenges of everyday life. If you enjoy relaxing history stories like this, be sure to subscribe to the channel and get comfortable as we discover how people endured the hottest days in history. Imagine waking up on a summer morning over 100 years ago, before the sun had even climbed high into the sky. Your bedroom already felt warm and heavy. There was no gentle hum of an air conditioner, no cool breeze flowing from a vent, and certainly no thermostat waiting to rescue you from the rising heat. Instead, every family understood that the coming hours would test their patience, strength, and endurance. As the morning continued, the walls of homes slowly absorbed the sun's warmth. Brick buildings trapped heat like giant ovens, while crowded apartments became almost impossible to escape. Windows were opened as wide as possible, but on many days the outside air was just as hot as the air inside. Curtains were kept closed to block sunlight, yet every room still seemed to grow warmer with each passing hour. For people living in busy cities, the situation became even worse. Streets made of stone reflected the sunlight back into the air, creating temperatures that felt unbearable. Horses pulled heavy wagons through dusty roads while workers wiped sweat from their faces. Every few minutes, factory employees spent long shifts beside roaring machines that produced even more heat, leaving many completely exhausted before the day had ended. At home, simple daily tasks became difficult. Cooking over wood or coal stoves filled kitchens with intense heat, forcing many families to prepare meals early in the morning or late in the evening when temperatures were slightly lower. Mothers often tried to keep children outdoors beneath trees or on shaded porches because the inside of the house felt far too uncomfortable. Drinking cold water was also a luxury many people could not enjoy. Refrigerators did not exist in most homes, so families depended on large blocks of ice delivered by horse-drawn wagons. These blocks were carefully stored inside wooden iceboxes lined with insulation. Every piece of ice was valuable because once it melted, there was no easy way to replace the cool air it had created. Children often gathered around the ice wagon hoping to catch tiny chips that fell onto the street. Those frozen pieces were treasured on the hottest afternoons, offering just a brief moment of relief before disappearing into water. Even sleeping became a nightly struggle. Bedsheets stuck to sweaty skin. Mosquitoes buzzed through open windows, and many people lay awake for hours hoping for a breeze that never arrived. Some families dragged mattresses onto porches or rooftops, believing the open night air might feel cooler than the suffocating rooms inside their homes. Yet even under the stars, the heat often refused to let go. For those who could afford it, large hand fans became an essential part of daily life. Wealthy families often hired servants whose job included waving enormous fans during meals or while their employers rested. In grand hotels, restaurants, and theatres, ceiling fans powered by belts connected to steam engines slowly moved air across crowded rooms. But these systems were expensive and available to only a small part of society. Most ordinary people relied on nothing more than patience and determination. Clothing also reflected the battle against the heat. Men loosened collars whenever social rules allowed, while women searched for lighter fabrics despite strict fashions that still required heavy dresses and multiple layers. Children often ran barefoot through dusty streets because shoes trapped even more warmth. On especially hot afternoons, parks filled with families sitting beneath the shade of enormous trees, hoping nature would provide what technology could not. Cities searched desperately for ways to cool themselves. Public fountains attracted crowds, and many people soaked clothes in cold water before placing them around their necks or over their heads. Some families sprinkled water across wooden floors or sidewalks, believing that as the moisture evaporated, it would slightly lower the surrounding temperature. Every tiny improvement mattered because even a difference of a few degrees could make life feel more bearable. Heat waves were not simply uncomfortable, they were dangerous. Elderly people, infants, and workers performing physical labour faced the greatest risks. Doctors had limited knowledge about dehydration and heat stroke, so many illnesses were misunderstood until it was too late. Newspapers frequently warned readers to avoid unnecessary activity during the hottest hours. Yet millions had no choice. Factory workers, farmers, construction crews, and delivery drivers still had to earn a living under the blazing sun. Businesses rarely stopped simply because temperatures became extreme. The arrival of evening did not always bring relief. Buildings continued releasing the heat they had stored throughout the day, making city neighbourhoods remain hot long after sunset. Families gathered outside on front porches, talking quietly with neighbours while hoping for a cool breeze. Children played until darkness because the outdoors often felt more comfortable than the inside of their homes. Many places, people believed they could predict tomorrow's weather by watching the wind, the clouds, or even the behaviour of birds, desperately searching for signs that cooler days were finally approaching. Summer was not viewed as a season of vacations and relaxation. For countless families, it was simply another obstacle that demanded endurance, careful planning, and remarkable resilience every single day. The heat influenced nearly every part of society, even the way people dressed. During the hottest months, men often removed their jackets whenever possible, rolled up their sleeves, and loosened stiff collars that trapped warmth around their necks. Women chose lighter fabrics when they could, although fashion often demanded long dresses and several layers that made summer even more uncomfortable. Hats protected people from direct sunlight, but they also trapped heat, creating another difficult compromise between comfort and necessity. Schools frequently struggled during the hottest weeks of the year. Classrooms filled with dozens of children quickly became stuffy, and teachers opened every window in hopes of catching even the smallest breeze. Students waved notebooks like fans, their attention drifting as sweat rolled down their faces. Learning became difficult when the room itself seemed determined to drain everyone's energy. In factories and workshops, the danger was far greater. Blacksmiths, bakers, glassmakers, and steel workers laboured beside blazing furnaces where temperatures climbed far beyond those outside. Many drank enormous amounts of water throughout the day, yet dehydration remained common. Exhausted workers sometimes fainted beside their machines, forcing others to carry them into the shade before they could recover. Entertainment also changed with the seasons. Instead of remaining indoors, families gathered outside after sunset when the air finally became bearable. Neighbours sat together on porches, sharing stories while children played in the streets until darkness settled. Over the town, parks, riverbanks, and beaches became welcome. Escapes where people searched for moving air and cooler temperatures. Ice cream, chilled lemonade, and cold fruit became treasured treats not simply because they tasted good, but because they offered a few refreshing moments during endless days of heat. Even churches adjusted their schedules, with some services held earlier in the morning or later in the evening to avoid the harshest hours. Newspapers printed advice on staying cool, encouraging readers to drink water, avoid unnecessary work, and keep windows open after sunset. Every family developed its own traditions for surviving the season, passing simple tricks from one generation to the next. Looking back today, it is easy to forget how completely modern air conditioning transformed everyday life. Offices, hospitals, schools, shopping centres, and homes now remain comfortable even during the hottest days. Before that invention, however, summer was not simply another season. It was an annual challenge that demanded endurance, careful planning, and remarkable resilience. Millions of ordinary people survived it year after year, using nothing more than common sense, clever home design, community support, and the hope that cooler autumn days would eventually return once again. For many people, one of the greatest sources of relief came from water. Rivers, lakes, and public bathhouses became gathering places. Whenever the weather turned unbearably hot, children spent entire afternoons swimming whenever they had the opportunity, while adults dipped their feet into cool water after long hours of exhausting work. In coastal towns, sea breezes offered a comfort that inland cities could only dream about. Yet for millions living far from beaches or rivers, there was little escape beyond waiting patiently for sunset. Nights were expected to bring relief, but they often disappointed. Brick buildings continued releasing the heat they had absorbed throughout the day, making bedrooms feel almost as warm at midnight as they had during the afternoon. Families opened every door and window they owned, hoping to create a gentle cross breeze. Some even hung damp sheets across open windows so passing air would feel slightly cooler as it entered the room. Others filled metal basins with cold water and placed them nearby, believing the evaporation would reduce the temperature, just enough to make sleep possible. Although these methods helped a little, they could never match the comfort people enjoy today. Heat waves also affected food. Without reliable refrigeration, fresh milk spoiled quickly. Meat could become dangerous within hours, and vegetables wilted far faster than expected. Housewives often shopped every single morning because storing food for several days was nearly impossible during the hottest weeks of summer. Iceboxes slowed spoilage, but only while enough ice remained inside. Once the ice melted, families hurried to cook whatever food was left before it went bad. Markets became busiest at sunrise, when both temperatures and food quality were at their best. Summer also brought insects in overwhelming numbers. Flies gathered around kitchens, while mosquitoes invaded homes every evening through open windows that families dared not close. Thin curtains and simple screens offered limited protection, but countless people still woke covered with itchy bites. The constant buzzing became another reason why peaceful sleep was so difficult to find. Despite all these hardships, Communities learned to help one another. Neighbours shared ice when deliveries were delayed, checked on elderly residents during dangerous heat waves, and gathered outdoors after sunset where conversation distracted everyone from the lingering warmth. Looking back, it becomes clear that surviving summer before air conditioning required far more than tolerance for hot weather. It demanded creativity, cooperation, patience, and a willingness to adapt every part of daily life. What feels like a simple press of a button today would have seemed almost magical to those who spent every summer wondering whether tomorrow might finally bring a cooling breeze from the horizon. As the 19th century came to an end, inventors and engineers searched for better ways to control indoor temperatures. But for ordinary families, those inventions still seemed far beyond reach. Most people accepted the heat as an unavoidable part of life, just as they accepted cold winters or heavy storms. Newspapers continued printing advice about surviving summer, recommending loose clothing, plenty of drinking water, and avoiding hard physical work during the hottest hours of the afternoon. Employers sometimes adjusted working schedules, allowing labourers to begin before sunrise so they could finish earlier in the day. Even then, the relief was limited, because many factories remained dangerously hot from their own machinery. Hospitals faced some of their busiest weeks during severe heat waves. Doctors noticed that crowded neighbourhoods suffered the most because narrow streets trapped warm air and tall buildings blocked cooling breezes. Poor families living in small apartments often had nowhere to escape. Several generations sometimes shared a single room, making the air feel even heavier throughout the night. Volunteers and charities occasionally distributed clean drinking water or blocks of ice to those who could not afford them. Small acts of kindness that made an enormous difference during extreme temperatures. Meanwhile, architects slowly began paying closer attention to natural cooling techniques. Homes in warmer regions featured wide verandas, tall ceilings shaded courtyards, and windows positioned to capture every possible breeze. Large trees were planted around houses, not only for beauty but because their shade reduced indoor temperatures throughout the day. These ideas had been used for centuries in many parts of the world, proving that careful design could sometimes accomplish what machines had not yet achieved. Eventually, everything changed. In the early 20th century, modern air conditioning systems began appearing inside certain factories and businesses. At first, they were not created simply to keep people comfortable. Many were designed to protect machinery, paper, or manufactured products from excessive heat and humidity. Only later did people realize that the same technology could completely transform everyday life. Offices became more productive, hospitals became safer, movie theatres attracted crowds seeking cool air, and homes slowly followed as the technology became more affordable. Today, it is almost impossible to imagine spending weeks inside sweltering buildings without the comfort of cooled air. A single power outage on a hot summer afternoon can remind us how quickly discomfort returns. Yet for countless generations before us, there was no switch to press and no cool air waiting behind a wall. They survived with patience, practical knowledge, and remarkable resilience. Their daily struggle against the summer Heat quietly shaped architecture, city planning, working bets, and even family life, leaving behind a history that is rarely remembered whenever we step into a comfortably cooled room on the hottest day of the year. Although air conditioning eventually spread across much of the world, its arrival did not happen overnight. For many families, electric cooling remained far too expensive for years. Even after neighbours began installing window units, countless households continued relying on the same traditional methods their parents and grandparents had used: open windows, shaded porches, hand fans, cool drinks, and evening breezes remained part of everyday summer life well into the 20th century. In rural communities, life followed the rhythm of the weather more closely than the clock. Farmers planned their work around the rising sun, harvesting crops in the cool hours of dawn before the fields became unbearably hot. Animals also required constant attention. Horses, cows, and chickens needed fresh water throughout the day, and livestock were often moved beneath trees whenever possible. A prolonged heat wave could damage crops, reduce milk production, and threaten entire harvests, making summer not only uncomfortable but financially dangerous for many families. Cities slowly adapted as well. More public parks were created to provide shaded places where residents could escape crowded streets. Tree-lined avenues became increasingly popular because they lowered temperatures naturally while improving air quality. Architects experimented with larger windows, better ventilation, lighter coloured roofs, and building materials that reflected sunlight instead of absorbing it. These ideas, many of which are still used today, showed that clever design could reduce heat long before modern technology solved the problem completely. Looking back through old photographs, it is easy to notice crowds sitting outside during the evening rather than inside their homes. Entire neighbourhoods came alive after sunset. Children laughed in the streets. Adults shared stories on front steps. And families enjoyed the first comfortable hours of the day together. In more ways, the struggle against summer heat brought communities closer because everyone experienced the same challenge. People exchanged advice, shared water, checked on vulnerable neighbours, and helped each other through the hottest weeks of the year. Today we often think of air conditioning as a simple convenience, something we barely notice until it suddenly stops working. Yet its invention quietly changed where people lived, how cities grew, how buildings were designed, and even where businesses could operate. Regions once considered too hot for comfortable living expanded rapidly, because cool indoor air made year-round life possible. The next time you step inside on a scorching afternoon and instantly feel cool air against your skin, it is worth remembering that for thousands of years people had no such luxury. They faced every blazing summer with determination, patience, and remarkable ingenuity, proving that even without modern comforts, ordinary people could adapt to extraordinary conditions and continue building the world we know today. In recent years, historians have become increasingly interested in the forgotten experience of living through summer before. Modern cooling systems, old diaries, newspaper articles, and personal letters describe endless days of sticky heat, restless nights, and the small victories people celebrated whenever a cool breeze finally arrived. These first-hand accounts remind us that history is not only about kings, wars, or famous inventions. It is also about ordinary people trying to make it through another difficult day with whatever resources they had. Many children who grew up before air conditioning remembered summer as both wonderful and exhausting. They recalled chasing the ice delivery wagon through the streets, waiting excitedly for thunderstorms that cooled the air, and sleeping outside beneath blankets of stars with brothers and sisters beside them. Adults remembered something different. They spoke of endless laundry drying beneath the scorching sun, kitchens that felt like furnaces while preparing meals, and long hours of physical labour without any escape from the relentless heat. Every generation carried its own memories of those summers, shaped by both hardship and resilience. Interestingly, many traditions that survive today were born during those years. Drinking iced tea on hot afternoons, enjoying lemonade on front porches, taking evening walks after sunset, and gathering outdoors once temperatures dropped all became popular because people searched for simple ways to stay comfortable. What began as practical solutions eventually turned into beloved customs, passed from parents to children over many decades. Even the architecture of historic neighbourhoods still tells this story. Wide verandas tall, shade trees, transom windows above doors, and homes built to catch. Natural breezes stand as quiet, reminders of a world where every degree of cooler air mattered. These buildings were carefully designed to work with nature rather than against it, using sunlight, wind, and shade as valuable tools long before electricity became common. As technology advanced, people gradually forgot many of these skills because machines solved problems that once demanded creativity and patience. Yet there is something inspiring about the generations who lived without that convenience. They adapted instead of giving up. They changed their routines, redesigned their homes, helped their neighbours, and found moments of joy even during the hottest weeks of the year. Their experiences remind us how quickly people can adjust to difficult circumstances and how every day challenges quietly shape history. While we now enjoy the comfort of cool rooms with little thought, those forgotten summers reveal a different world. One where every breeze felt precious, every shadow offered relief, and every passing cloud brought hope that tomorrow might finally be just a little cooler than today. Of course, not every part of the world experienced summer in exactly the same way. People living in deserts had already developed remarkable techniques for keeping homes cooler centuries before electricity existed. Thick adobe walls absorbed heat slowly. Narrow streets remained shaded for much of the day, and courtyards with fountains created pockets of cooler air. In hotter parts of Asia and the Middle East, builders even designed structures that captured passing winds and directed them into homes, creating natural ventilation that amazed later engineers. These ideas proved that human ingenuity could often overcome even the harshest climates. In Europe and North America, however, rapidly growing industrial cities created a new problem. Factories replaced open fields, brick buildings replaced trees, and smoke from countless chimneys filled the sky. As cities expanded, they trapped more heat than the surrounding countryside. making urban summers increasingly uncomfortable. Although people did not yet use the phrase urban heat island, they certainly felt its effects. Many noticed that evenings remained warmer inside cities than in nearby villages, where open fields and forests cooled much more quickly after sunset. Businesses also learned to adapt. Movie theaters became famous not only for entertainment, but eventually for their pleasantly cool interiors. Once mechanical cooling systems appeared. For set, audiences relied on large ceiling fans that turned slowly throughout performances, moving warm air rather than truly cooling it. Department stores installed enormous windows to let in daylight while opening every entrance they could to encourage airflow. Restaurants served cold desserts and chilled drinks that became symbols of relief during the hottest months. Summer advertisements often focused less on luxury and more on comfort, promising customers a brief escape from exhausting temperatures. Even fashion gradually changed as society realized that lighter fabrics and simpler clothing were healthier. During extreme heat, heavy wool garments slowly gave way to cotton and linen during summer months, allowing people to move more comfortably while reducing the risk of overheating. These changes may seem small today, but together they transformed everyday life little by little. Looking back across history, it becomes clear that the invention of air conditioning did far more than cool buildings. It reshaped architecture, changed working hours, influenced clothing, altered city design, and opened entire regions of the world to larger populations. Yet, before all of those changes took place, generations faced each summer with remarkable determination. They accepted discomfort as a normal part of life, found creative ways to make difficult days bearable, and continued building families, businesses, and communities, despite conditions that many of us today would struggle to tolerate. For even a single afternoon, there is also an unexpected lesson hidden within this forgotten chapter of history. Without air conditioning, people paid far closer attention to the natural world than most of us do today. They watched the direction of the wind, noticed the movement of clouds, and recognized the cooling effect of evening breezes or approaching rainstorms. A sudden shift in temperature could completely change the rhythm of an entire neighborhood. The first clap of thunder often brought smiles instead of concern because everyone knew that rain usually meant precious relief from the oppressive heat. Families hurried outside after a summer storm, enjoying fresh air that finally felt comfortable after days of relentless sunshine. The smell of wet earth drifted through open windows, and children laughed as puddles formed along dusty streets. For a short time, the world felt alive again. Those moments became treasured memories because they reminded people that even the longest heat wave would eventually come to an end. Grandparents often shared stories about surviving particularly brutal summers, recalling years when rivers shrank, crops struggled, and entire towns prayed for rain. These stories were passed from one generation to the next, becoming part of family history. They taught patience, preparation, and respect for nature's power. Unlike today, when a thermostat can change the temperature in seconds, people understood that some things simply could not be controlled. They learned to work with the seasons instead of fighting against them. In many ways, that slower pace shaped stronger communities. Neighbours spent more time together outdoors during cooler evenings. Children played until darkness covered the streets, and conversations stretched late into the night as everyone enjoyed the brief comfort that followed sunset. Modern life has certainly become more comfortable, but it has also changed many of these simple traditions. Front porches are quieter, open windows are less common, and many people move from one air-conditioned building to another without ever noticing the summer air outside. It is easy to forget how extraordinary this convenience truly is. For nearly all of human history, cooling an entire room would have seemed impossible, almost magical. Yet millions of ordinary people built cities, raised families, harvested food, and created thriving civilizations without ever feeling cool air flowing from a machine. Their endurance reminds us that comfort is a luxury earned through centuries of innovation, while resilience has always been one of humanity's greatest strengths. The next chapter of this story reveals how one remarkable invention slowly changed the world forever, turning an age-old struggle into something future generations would barely have to think about. When the first practical air conditioning systems finally appeared, they were not celebrated as household luxuries. In fact, most ordinary people had never even imagined that entire buildings could be cooled artificially. The earliest systems were designed to solve industrial problems rather than improve personal comfort. Printing companies needed paper to remain dry. Textile mills struggled with humidity that damaged fabric, and factories producing delicate products required stable temperatures to maintain quality. Engineers focused on these practical challenges, unaware that their invention would eventually transform everyday life across the globe. As businesses began installing these systems, workers immediately noticed the difference. Offices became more comfortable. Employees remained productive during the hottest months, and customers preferred visiting buildings where the air felt cool and refreshing. Movie theatres quickly recognised this advantage as well. On scorching summer afternoons, advertisements proudly invited families to escape the heat inside comfortable auditoriums. Some people even purchased tickets simply to enjoy the cool air, paying less attention to the film than to the welcome relief from the weather outside. Slowly, public opinion began to change. What had once seemed like an impossible dream gradually became a realistic goal for homes as technology improved and costs decreased. Manufacturers competed to build smaller, quieter, and more affordable machines. By the middle of the 20th century, air conditioning was no longer limited to factories or wealthy businesses. Families began installing units in living rooms and bedrooms, forever changing the experience of summer. Children growing up with air conditioning often found it difficult to believe stories told by their grandparents about sleeping on rooftops, chasing ice wagons through dusty streets, or waving hand fans for hours during sleepless nights. Those memories belong to another era, disappearing more quickly with each passing generation. Yet historians continue preserving these accounts because they reveal how dramatically one invention altered daily life. It changed where people chose to live, how cities expanded into hotter climates, and even how architects designed homes and office buildings. Glass skyscrapers, enclosed shopping malls, and modern hospitals would have been almost impossible without reliable cooling systems. Every time we step into a pleasantly cool building on a blazing summer afternoon, we are experiencing the result of decades of engineering and countless small innovations. It is a comfort so familiar that we rarely stop to appreciate it. But behind every cool room lies a forgotten history of generations who endured relentless summers with patience, creativity, and determination, proving that long before machines offered relief, human resilience remained the greatest tool for surviving the heat. Even today, there are still places where people experience summers much like their ancestors once did. In remote villages without reliable electricity, families continue opening windows before sunrise, closing shutters during the afternoon, and gathering outside after sunset when the air finally begins to cool. Their routines closely resemble those followed by millions of people more than a century ago, reminding us that history is never as distant as it sometimes appears. Scientists have also become increasingly interested in the traditional methods used before air conditioning became common. Many architects now study historic buildings too, understand how they stayed cooler, using only natural ventilation, thick walls, shaded courtyards, and carefully positioned windows. As modern cities face rising temperatures and increasing energy demands, some of these forgotten techniques are making an unexpected return. Designers have discovered that combining old ideas with new technology can reduce electricity use while creating more comfortable homes. In a surprising way, the past is helping shape the future. Climate historians point out that people once accepted seasonal discomfort as a normal part of life. Summer meant slower afternoons, lighter meals, earlier mornings, and longer evenings spent outdoors. Communities naturally adjusted their routines instead of expecting every room to remain the same temperature throughout the year. Although modern cooling has brought enormous health and economic benefits, it has also changed the relationship between people and the changing seasons. Many of us now spend so much time indoors that we notice the weather only when moving between buildings and vehicles. Yet the stories left behind by earlier generations reveal a different world, one where every breeze carried meaning and every shaded tree offered genuine relief. Reading their diaries, it is impossible not to admire the quiet determination that filled ordinary lives. They complained about the heat, certainly, but they also adapted with remarkable creativity. They invented clever household tricks, built stronger communities, and found comfort in simple moments that many people overlook today. A cloudy afternoon, a cool drink shared with neighbours, or the distant sound of thunder approaching across the horizon could completely change the mood of an entire town. Those experiences remind us that comfort is often appreciated most by those who have lived without it. The history of summer before air conditioning is ultimately not just the story of heat. It is the story of human adaptability, resourcefulness, and perseverance. Long before a machine could cool the air at the touch of a button, ordinary people continued living full and meaningful lives, proving that the greatest source of resilience has never been technology alone, but the remarkable ability of people to adjust, endure, and move forward no matter how difficult the season became. Perhaps the most remarkable part of this story is how quickly people forgot what life had once been like. Within only a few generations, the endless struggle against summer heat faded into memory. Children grew up expecting cool classrooms, comfortable hospitals, air-conditioned buses, and homes where a simple press of a button could transform the hottest afternoon into a pleasant evening. The routines that had shaped everyday life for centuries slowly disappeared. Hand fans became decorative souvenirs instead of essential tools. Iceboxes found their way into museums, and sleeping on porches during summer became an increasingly rare sight. Yet old photographs still preserve those forgotten moments. Families can be seen sitting together outside after sunset, neighbours talking across wooden fences, children running barefoot through sprinklers, and elderly couples quietly rocking on shaded porches while waiting for the evening breeze. Those images remind us that people once organised entire lives around the weather. They respected nature because they had little choice. Every cloud, every gust of wind, and every summer storm had the power to change an ordinary day. Historians often describe great inventions by measuring their economic impact or technological importance. But air conditioning changed something far more personal. It changed how people slept, how they worked, how they built homes, where they chose to live, and even how they spent time with family and friends. Entire regions that had once been considered too hot for large populations suddenly began growing rapidly. Modern skylines, enormous shopping centres, and towering office buildings owe part of their existence to the ability to control indoor temperatures. Without that breakthrough, many of the places we know today would look completely different. Still, there is something worth remembering from the generations that came before. They understood patience in a way that modern society rarely experiences. They accepted that some days would simply be uncomfortable, and instead of searching for instant solutions, they adapted their routines with remarkable resilience. They woke earlier, rested during the hottest hours, gathered together after sunset, and appreciated every cool breeze as a gift rather than an expectation. Their lives were undoubtedly harder, but they also developed habits and traditions that strengthened families and communities. As we enjoy the comfort of modern technology today, it is fascinating to imagine how astonished those earlier generations would be if they could step into one of our homes on a scorching summer afternoon. They would probably pause for a moment, smile as cool air surrounded them, and wonder how something that once seemed impossible had become such an ordinary part of everyday life. And with that thought, our journey through the sweltering summers before air conditioning slowly comes to an end, leaving us with a deeper appreciation for both the hardships of the past and the comforts of the present. Before we finish this journey, it is worth asking one simple question. If you had to spend just 1 week living through a summer before air conditioning, how would you cope? There would be no cool bedroom waiting after a long day, number chilled car during your commute, and no refreshing blast of cold air when entering a store. Every task, from cooking dinner to trying to fall asleep, would require patience and determination. You would probably find yourself waking before sunrise, resting during the hottest part of the afternoon, and eagerly waiting for the first cool breeze after sunset. Small comforts that seem ordinary today would suddenly feel extraordinary. A glass of cold water, a shady tree, or a passing rainstorm would become the highlights of your day. Looking back at history, it becomes clear that people were far stronger and more adaptable than we often imagine. They did not have modern technology to solve every problem, yet they continued raising families, building towns, working long hours, and supporting one another through every difficult season. Their lives remind us that comfort is not what defines human progress. It is perseverance, creativity, and the ability to adapt when circumstances are far from perfect. The next time you hear the quiet sound of an air conditioner starting on a hot afternoon, take a moment to remember the countless generations who never answered that simple luxury, their forgotten struggle against the summer heat became part of the foundation of the modern world we enjoy today. And perhaps that is the greatest lesson this story leaves behind. The conveniences we rarely notice are often built upon centuries of endurance by people whose names history has long since forgotten. History also reminds us that every generation believes its way of life is normal until something revolutionary changes it forever. For centuries, people accepted unbearable summer heat as simply another fact of life. No one expected every room to be cool because such an idea seemed impossible. Then, within a relatively short period, air conditioning transformed expectations across the world. Comfort became the standard rather than the exception. As new generations grew up, they could hardly imagine that their grandparents had once spent entire nights unable to sleep because of the heat. Museums now display hand fans, wooden iceboxes, and old photographs of families sleeping on porches. But these objects represent much more than outdated technology. They tell the story of people who solved problems with patience instead of machines. They remind us that innovation often begins with ordinary people searching for better ways to live. Even today, during power outages caused by storms or heat waves, communities briefly experience a small glimpse of the past. Homes become warmer with each passing hour. Refrigerators stop cooling, electric fans fall silent, and suddenly open windows, shaded trees, and evening breezes become important once again. Those moments help us appreciate how extraordinary modern cooling truly is. They also reveal that many traditional methods still work surprisingly well when technology is unavailable. Opening windows at the right time, blocking direct sunlight with curtains, drinking plenty of water, and avoiding heavy activity during the hottest hours are pieces of wisdom passed down through generations long before electricity reached most homes. In more ways, the people who lived before air conditioning understood summer better than we do today because they had no choice but to observe it carefully. They knew which side of the house stayed coolest, which trees provided the deepest shade, and exactly when the evening breeze usually arrived. Their knowledge came from daily experience, rather than weather, forecasts or smartphone apps. Perhaps that is why their stories continue to fascinate historians. They reveal that progress is not only measured by inventions, but also by the resilience of the people who lived before those inventions existed. Every cool room we enjoy today is connected to countless generations who endured sweltering summers without complaint, adapting with remarkable creativity and determination. Their quiet perseverance reminds us that history is often hidden within the ordinary moments of everyday life, waiting to be remembered by those willing to look back and appreciate how far humanity has come. As historians continue uncovering personal letters and journals from the past, one detail appears again and again. People rarely described summer as relaxing. Instead, they wrote about endurance. A farmer recorded how he began harvesting crops before dawn because by midday, the fields shimmered beneath waves of unbearable heat. A factory worker explained that his clothes became soaked with sweat before breakfast, while a mother described spending hours gently fanning her sleeping child through the night. These were not extraordinary events. They were simply part of everyday life before modern cooling existed. Travellers also faced enormous challenges during the hottest months. Long journeys by horse, train, or carriage became exhausting as vehicles trapped warm air with little circulation. Dust clung to sweaty skin, drinking water quickly became warm, and passengers eagerly waited for stops where they could stretch their legs beneath the shade of a large tree. Hotels proudly advertised rooms with better ventilation or shaded verandas because these features often attracted more guests than expensive furniture. Even simple activities like attending church, visiting friends, or shopping at the local market required careful planning to avoid the strongest afternoon sun. Looking around today, it is astonishing how invisible this old struggle has become. Airports, schools, libraries, offices, supermarkets, and restaurants all maintain comfortable temperatures that previous generations could scarcely have imagined. Modern life continues almost unchanged regardless of how hot it becomes outside. Yet beneath that comfort lies a forgotten history stretching back thousands of years, when every summer demanded patience and ingenuity. Without realizing it, we benefit every day from lessons learned through centuries of experience. Architects still position buildings to capture natural light and airflow. Urban planners plant trees to cool streets naturally. Engineers design energy-efficient systems inspired by ideas that people first discovered long before electricity transformed the world. In many respects, the wisdom of the past still shapes the comfort of the present. Perhaps the greatest surprise is that despite all the hardship, many people later remembered those summers with unexpected affection. They recalled evenings filled with conversation on front porches, children laughing beneath sprinklers, families watching lightning flash across distant skies, and neighbours sharing cold drinks while waiting for cooler air to arrive. The discomfort was real, but so was the sense of community created by facing the same challenge together. Their memories remind us that history is not only a collection of inventions and dates. It is also the story of ordinary moments, quiet resilience, and people finding happiness even when life offered far fewer comforts than it does today. Those forgotten summers continue to whisper an important lesson across the generations. Human beings have always possessed an extraordinary ability to adapt, endure, and create hope even during the hottest days imaginable. If there is one final image that captures life before air conditioning, it is the sight of an entire neighbourhood waiting for the sun to disappear below the horizon. As daylight slowly faded, doors opened, windows were pushed wide, and families stepped outside almost at the same moment. The air was still warm, but every passing minute felt more comfortable than the last. Conversations filled the streets as neighbours greeted one another after spending the hottest hours indoors. Children played games until the sky turned dark blue, while adults relaxed in rocking chairs, grateful that another difficult day had finally come to an end. The stars above offered no cool breeze of their own, yet simply being outside often felt far better than remaining inside overheated houses. These evening gatherings became one of the defining traditions of summer life. They strengthened friendships, created lifelong memories, and reminded people that even uncomfortable seasons could bring moments of happiness. Time moved more slowly, allowing families to enjoy simple pleasures that required no electricity at all. A cool drink shared with friends, the distant sound of crickets, the scent of flowers carried by a gentle breeze, or the first rumble of thunder in the distance could transform an ordinary evening into something unforgettable. In more ways, people appreciated comfort more deeply because they had lived without it for so long. Every refreshing breeze felt earned rather than expected. Every cloudy afternoon brought hope that tomorrow might finally be cooler. Historians often focus on inventions themselves, but the true story lies in the lives of the ordinary people who experienced the world before those inventions arrived. Their patience shaped communities. Their creativity inspired better buildings. And their determination proved that humanity could adapt to almost any environment. While technology has changed the way we experience summer, it has not changed the resilience that allowed earlier generations to survive it. Their story deserves to be remembered not because they suffered, but because they continued moving forward despite the discomfort. The next time a cool stream of air flows through your home on a sweltering afternoon, it may be worth pausing for just a second to imagine those who came before us. They would likely smile in amazement at such a simple luxury, knowing that for most of human history, surviving summer depended not on machines, but on patience, ingenuity, and the quiet strength of ordinary people facing another hot day together. Yet perhaps the greatest legacy of life before air conditioning cannot be measured in degrees or inventions. It can only be measured in the resilience of the people who lived through those summers. They accepted challenges that would seem almost unimaginable today and found practical solutions with the tools available to them. Every family developed its own traditions for staying cool. Some sprinkled water across wooden floors before bedtime, believing the evaporation would make the house slightly more comfortable. Others hung wet cloths in front of open windows or slept with their feet uncovered to catch even the faintest breeze. None of these methods completely solved the problem, but together they made difficult nights a little easier to endure. Summer also taught patience. There was no quick escape from the weather, so people learned to slow their pace. Heavy work was postponed until morning or evening. Long conversations took place beneath the shade of trees. and entire communities naturally adjusted to the rhythm of the season. In many towns, church bells, factory whistles, and school schedules quietly reflected the changing temperatures throughout the year. Nature dictated the pace of daily life in ways that modern technology has largely erased. Looking through old family photographs, historians often notice something interesting. During summer months, many pictures were taken outdoors. Families gathered beneath large trees, children played near rivers, and neighbours filled front porches after sunset. These were not simply pleasant places to spend time. They were the coolest locations available. Shade was precious, moving water was treasured, and evening air became the greatest comfort people could hope for after a long day beneath the blazing sun. Even the arrival of autumn carried special meaning. The first cool morning was greeted almost like a celebration. Windows remained open throughout the day, blankets returned to beds, and people finally slept peacefully without waking in the middle of the night drenched in sweat. After months of enduring relentless heat, the changing season felt like a reward. It reminded everyone that no hardship lasts forever. Today, we rarely think about these small seasonal victories, because climate control has made every month feel remarkably similar indoors. Yet for most of history, the changing weather shaped every aspect of human life. Remembering that forgotten reality allows us to appreciate both the remarkable inventions that transformed the modern world and the extraordinary determination of the generations who lived without them. Their story continues to remind us that comfort may come from technology, but endurance has always come from the human spirit. The story of summer before air conditioning is also the story of countless small inventions that most people never think about today. Ceiling fans became more common because even moving warm air felt better than no air at all. Window shades were designed to block direct sunlight before it entered the house, and light-coloured roofs reflected heat instead of absorbing it. Builders carefully positioned homes to catch prevailing winds, knowing that a gentle breeze could make the difference between a tolerable evening and a sleepless night. Every improvement, no matter how small, represented another attempt to outsmart the relentless heat. Communities also discovered that water could transform entire neighbourhoods. Public fountains were built, not only as beautiful landmarks but as gathering places where people could cool themselves. Large parks with ponds and tall trees created natural refuges from crowded streets filled with stone and brick. City leaders gradually realised that planting thousands of trees lowered temperatures while making neighbourhoods healthier and more comfortable. Many of the parks enjoyed by millions today began as practical responses to unbearable summer conditions, rather than purely decorative projects. Heat even influenced culture in unexpected ways. Summer festivals often began after sunset, when temperatures finally became comfortable enough for dancing, music, and celebration. Outdoor concerts, evening markets, and community gatherings flourished because daylight hours were simply too hot for many activities. Families planned weddings, holidays, and social events around the weather, carefully choosing times that allowed guests to remain comfortable. In this way, the climate quietly shaped traditions that survived for generations. The arrival of electricity improved life in many ways, but electric fans alone could not solve the problem. They circulated air, yet during severe heat waves the breeze often felt like warm breath rather than genuine relief. Only with the spread of true air conditioning did people begin expecting indoor temperatures to remain pleasant, regardless of the weather outside. That expectation has become so normal that we rarely stop to appreciate how revolutionary it truly is. Looking back, it becomes clear that every cool room tells a hidden story. Behind each comfortable office, school, hospital, and home stand centuries of human experience, observation, and innovation. The generations who endured those scorching summers may never have imagined the world we live in today, but their struggles inspired many of the ideas that eventually made modern comfort possible. Their legacy is not simply the invention of a machine. It is the reminder that progress often begins with ordinary people refusing to accept unnecessary hardship and continuously searching for better was to life, one small improvement at a time. Perhaps the greatest irony is that the people who lived before air conditioning rarely thought they were living through an extraordinary period of history. To them, opening every window before sunrise, carrying a hand fan everywhere they went, or searching for shade during the hottest hours simply felt normal. They did not know that future generations would one day step into perfectly cooled homes, offices, and schools without giving the temperature a second thought. Their daily routines, once ordinary, have now become fascinating glimpses into a vanished world. Old newspaper advertisements reveal just how valuable coolness had become long before modern air conditioners reached ordinary homes. Companies promoted insulated iceboxes, trick fence-like clothing, and refreshing drinks as essential tools for surviving summer. Hotels proudly claimed their rooms were better ventilated than their competitors, while restaurants tempted customers with chilled desserts and cold beverages, prepared using precious blocks of delivered ice. Even small improvements were celebrated because they offered a little more comfort during long, exhausting heat waves. Historians also point out that many cities looked and sounded different in summer. Streets became quieter during the afternoon because people avoided unnecessary travel. Beneath the blazing sun, business slowed until evening, when cooler temperatures encouraged shoppers to return. Street musicians, food vendors, and performers often waited until sunset before beginning their work, knowing that crowds would only gather once the heat had started to fade. In many communities, summer evenings became the busiest and most social part of the entire day. As technology continued advancing throughout the 20th century, these traditions gradually faded. Air conditioning allowed businesses to remain active all day, encouraged larger indoor shopping centres, and changed the way people interacted with their neighbourhoods. Front porches slowly emptied. Evening gatherings became less common, and many families spent more time indoors than ever before. While modern comfort brought undeniable advantages, it also quietly transformed the rhythm of everyday life in ways few people noticed at the time. Looking back across this forgotten history, one lesson becomes impossible to ignore. Human beings have always adapted to the world around them, whether by building thicker walls, planting shade trees, inventing better machines, or simply helping one another through difficult seasons. Every generation inherits the achievements of those who came before, often without realizing how much effort those improvements required. The cool air that surrounds us today is not merely the result of a single invention. It is the final chapter of a much longer story written by countless ordinary people who faced the relentless heat with patience, creativity, and quiet determination, leaving behind a legacy that continues to make our lives more comfortable every single summer. Even after air conditioning became more common, not everyone welcomed the change immediately. Some people believed that constantly moving between hot outdoor air and cool indoor spaces could make them ill. Others worried about the cost of electricity or preferred the familiar habit of opening windows and listening to the sounds of nature. For a time, old traditions and new technology existed side by side. One family might proudly install a modern cooling unit, while the neighbours across the street continued relying on ceiling fans, open porches, and evening breezes just as they always had. Gradually, however, comfort won the debate. As prices fell and technology improved, air conditioning spread into homes, schools, hospitals, trains, and eventually automobiles. Summer was no longer something people simply endured. It became a season they could enjoy with far fewer limitations. Vacations expanded into hotter regions. Businesses stayed open throughout the afternoon, and families spent more time indoors without worrying about unbearable temperatures. Yet there is something surprisingly valuable hidden in the memories of those earlier generations. They understood that comfort often depended on paying attention to the world around them. They noticed which side of the house received morning sunlight, where the coolest breeze usually entered, and which trees provided the deepest afternoon shade. They respected the rhythm of nature because ignoring it carried real consequences. Many of those practical observations are still useful today, especially as architects search for ways to design buildings that consume less energy while remaining comfortable. Looking through collections of old photographs, one detail appears repeatedly. People smiled just as they do now. They celebrated birthdays, gathered for picnics, attended festivals, and laughed with friends despite the intense summer heat. Their happiness did not depend entirely on perfect comfort. Instead, it came from family, community, and shared experiences. That may be one of the most important lessons this forgotten history offers us. Modern inventions have made life easier in countless ways, but the human ability to adapt, cooperate, and appreciate simple moments has always mattered just as much. Whether sitting beneath a shaded porch a century ago or relaxing in an air-conditioned living room today, people continue searching for the same things: safety, comfort, companionship, and peace. The technology has changed dramatically, but the human story has remained remarkably familiar. That is why the history of summer before air conditioning continues to fascinate us. It reminds us that behind every modern convenience lies a long journey of perseverance, creativity, and quiet determination, carried forward by ordinary people whose daily struggles slowly shaped the comfortable world we now take for granted. There is another reason this forgotten history deserves to be remembered. It reminds us that every modern convenience has a story behind it. We often notice technology only when it stops working. A brief power outage on a hot summer afternoon is enough to make a comfortable home begin warming surprisingly quickly. Within a short time, people start opening windows, searching for battery-powered fans, and hoping electricity returns before nightfall. Those few uncomfortable hours offer only the smallest glimpse into a reality that earlier generations experienced every single summer of their lives. They had no emergency backup, no portable cooling units, and no expectation that relief would arrive. Instead, they relied on experience gathered over many years. Families knew exactly when to close shutters to keep sunlight out, when to open windows for the strongest evening breeze, and which rooms stayed coolest throughout the day. These simple habits became valuable knowledge passed from parents to children. In some homes, grandparents taught younger generations how to arrange furniture so air could move more freely, or how to hang damp cloth near windows to make incoming breezes feel slightly cooler. Such skills may sound ordinary, but they represented centuries of practical wisdom earned through daily experience. Historians often say that technology changes not only how people live, but also how they think. Before air conditioning, people planned their schedules around the weather. Today, many people expect the weather to adjust to them instead. Offices remain comfortable regardless of the season. Shopping centres welcome visitors during the hottest afternoons, and children play indoors without giving much thought to the temperature outside. This transformation happened so gradually that few people noticed how dramatically daily life had changed. Yet despite every technological advance, one truth has remained exactly the same. Summer still reminds humanity of nature's incredible power. Heat waves continue breaking records, reminding us that no invention can completely erase the forces of the natural world. Modern cooling systems make life safer and more comfortable, but they also encourage us to appreciate the remarkable journey that brought us here. The generations who came before us endured scorching summers with courage, patience, and determination, leaving behind lessons that remain valuable even today. Their forgotten routines, quiet resilience, and endless creativity deserve a place in history because they reveal something timeless about the human spirit. No matter how difficult the conditions became, people always found another way to adapt, support one another, and look forward with hope to the cooler days that were certain to come. As we reflect on this journey through the summers of the past, it becomes clear that history is often hidden inside the ordinary moments people rarely wrote about in detail. There were no headlines announcing another hot afternoon or another restless night. Yet those experiences shaped millions of lives every single year. A child falling asleep on a porch swing. A father returning home with a block of ice balanced on his shoulder. A mother opening every window before sunrise. Or neighbours sharing stories. Beneath the evening sky, these simple scenes were repeated across towns and cities for generations. They formed the rhythm of everyday life before modern cooling quietly changed the world forever. Many of the buildings from that era still stand today, silently revealing the wisdom of their builders. Tall ceilings, wide hallways, covered porches, thick brick walls, and large windows were not simply beautiful architectural features. They were practical solutions created through centuries of observation. Every detail had a purpose, helping people stay as comfortable as possible without relying on electricity. Walking through one of these historic homes today is like stepping into a lesson from the past, where every doorway and every window tells a story about surviving summer through clever design rather than mechanical technology. Modern engineers continue studying these old techniques because they remain surprisingly effective. As the world searches for more sustainable ways to cool buildings, many forgotten ideas are returning once again. Natural ventilation, shaded courtyards, rooftop gardens, reflective materials, and carefully planted trees are becoming important parts of modern architecture. In an unexpected twist, the future is learning from the past. The people who once had no choice but to adapt to the heat left behind knowledge that is proving valuable even in the 21st century. Perhaps that is the greatest gift history offers us. It reminds us that progress does not erase the past. Instead, it builds upon it. Every invention carries the experience of countless generations who faced problems with patience and imagination until someone finally discovered a better solution. Air conditioning transformed the modern world, but the generations before it transformed humanity by demonstrating resilience, cooperation, and creativity under difficult conditions. Their quiet determination continues to inspire us today, proving that even the most ordinary struggles can leave an extraordinary legacy for those who come after. When we remember their story, we gain not only a deeper appreciation for modern comfort, but also a greater respect for the remarkable people who lived long before that comfort ever existed. Imagine standing on a quiet street 100 years ago. During the middle of July, the sun hangs high above the rooftops. The air feels heavy, and even the birds seem quieter than usual. There is no distant sound of air conditioners humming through open windows. Instead, you hear the creaking of porch swings, the slow rhythm of hand fans, and the occasional clip-clop of a horse pulling an ice wagon through the neighbourhood. Children stop whatever they are doing and watch with excitement as the driver carefully lifts enormous blocks of sparkling ice wrapped in burlap. For many families, that delivery represents the coolest part of the entire day. Inside homes, curtains remain tightly closed to keep sunlight from pouring into already warm rooms. Pitchers of water sit in shaded corners, while families avoid unnecessary movement until evening. Every decision is influenced by the temperature outside. Even letters written during those summers often begin with comments about the weather, showing just how deeply heat affected everyday conversation. Travellers from cooler regions frequently described feeling shocked by the conditions they encountered in southern cities, where humidity made the air feel almost impossible to breathe. Some compared stepping outside to walking directly into a steam bath. Yet the people who lived there had adapted over generations. They understood when to rest, when to work, and how to make the best use of every passing breeze. Looking back now, it is remarkable that so much of human History unfolded without the comfort we consider ordinary today. Great inventions were created. Businesses were built. Children grew into adults. And entire civilizations continued to flourish despite the relentless challenge of summer heat. Their achievements become even more impressive when we remember the conditions under which they lived. Every successful harvest, every brick laid, every railroad constructed, and every family raised took place in a world where escaping the heat was rarely possible. That perspective changes the way we see the past. It reminds us that history is not only shaped by famous leaders or dramatic events, but also by ordinary people, quietly overcoming everyday difficulties. Their determination did not make newspaper headlines, yet it carried societies forward one hot summer after another. Perhaps the next time a cool breeze flows from an air conditioner, we will appreciate it a little more, remembering the countless generations who dreamed of such comfort but never had the chance to experience it themselves. Their story is not just about surviving heat. It is about the remarkable endurance of the human spirit, a quality that has always remained stronger than even the hottest summer the world could produce. Perhaps the greatest difference between the past and the present is not the temperature itself, but our expectations. Today, when a room becomes slightly too warm, we instinctively reach for a remote control or adjust a thermostat. A century ago, there was no such option. People understood that nature set the rules, and they shaped their lives around those rules instead of trying to change them. Summer taught patience in ways that modern technology rarely requires. Waiting for sunset was not just a pleasant part of the day. It was often the only real relief available. Families watched the shadows slowly stretch across the ground, knowing that each passing hour brought them closer to cooler air. The arrival of evening transformed entire neighbourhoods. Windows that had remained closed against the blazing afternoon sun were opened wide, allowing fresh air to drift through every room. The smell of flowers, freshly watered gardens, and damp earth after an afternoon shower mixed together, creating memories that many elderly people would later describe with surprising affection. Even though the days were difficult, the evenings carried a peaceful beauty that many believed modern life had slowly forgotten. Historians studying personal diaries have noticed that people rarely measured happiness by physical comfort alone. Instead, they treasured moments spent with loved ones, simple meals shared outdoors, laughter echoing across quiet streets, and conversations that continued long after darkness had settled. These experiences remind us that while technology has dramatically improved our lives, some of the greatest joys have always come from human connection rather than convenience. It is easy to romanticize the past, but we should also remember how demanding it truly was. Endless heat, restless nights, spoiled food, exhausting labour, and constant discomfort tested people every summer. Yet despite those hardships, communities continued to celebrate. Children continued to laugh, and families continued building hopeful futures. Their resilience deserves admiration, because they accomplished extraordinary things under conditions that most of us would struggle to endure for even a few days. The history of life before air conditioning is ultimately about much more than weather. It is a reminder that progress is built one generation at a time. Every improvement we enjoy today exists because countless ordinary people faced challenges, searched for better solutions, and refused to stop believing that tomorrow could be more comfortable than yesterday. Their quiet determination changed the world without expecting recognition, leaving behind a legacy that continues to cool our homes, protect our health, and make even the hottest summer days feel far more bearable than they once were. As our journey through this forgotten world continues, one thing becomes impossible to ignore. Every generation leaves behind ordinary routines that later become extraordinary. Pieces of history. The people who lived before air conditioning never imagined that future generations would study the way they cooled their homes, planned their days, or survived long summer nights. To them, these habits were simply part of life. Yet today they reveal how adaptable human beings have always been. Across different countries and cultures, people arrived at remarkably similar solutions. They built homes with thick walls, planted trees for shade, rested during the hottest hours, and came together outside after sunset. Even though they spoke different languages and lived thousands of miles apart, they all shared the same challenge, the relentless heat of summer. This reminds us that history often connects humanity in unexpected ways. The struggle against nature was something nearly everyone understood. Looking through museum collections, historians found what hand fence, weathered water jugs, old thermometers, and carefully crafted wooden shutters. These objects may appear simple, but each one tells a story of survival. A handmade fan represented hours of relief during an endless afternoon. A heavy clay water jar kept drinking water cooler through natural evaporation. Thick wooden shutters protected entire families from direct sunlight. None of these inventions were spectacular on their own. Yet together they helped millions of people live more comfortably, long before electricity transformed the world. Perhaps this is why the history of everyday life has become so fascinating. It reminds us that the greatest changes in civilization are not always found in famous battles or royal palaces. Sometimes they are hidden inside kitchens, bedrooms, front porches, and quiet neighbourhoods where ordinary families faced ordinary problems with extraordinary determination. Every generation solved the challenges of its own time using whatever knowledge and resources were available. That same spirit continues today, inspiring new inventions and better ways of living. When future historians look back at our own lives, they may also be surprised by the things we consider completely normal. Just as we marvel at a world without air conditioning, people many decades from now may wonder how we lived with the technology we have today. History never truly stands still. It is a continuous story of people adapting, improving, and passing their knowledge to the next generation. And perhaps that is the most enduring lesson hidden within these long, sweltering summers of the past. Comfort changes, technology changes, and societies change. But the determination of ordinary people to overcome every new challenge remains one of the few things that never fades with time. There is one final perspective that helps us understand just how extraordinary this transformation has been. For nearly all of human history, comfort depended on the environment. Today, the environment inside our homes depends on us. With our single switch, We can create a cool summer afternoon in the middle of a scorching heat wave. That simple ability would have seemed almost miraculous to the generations who came before us. They spent entire lifetimes adapting themselves to nature, while we have learned to reshape our surroundings instead. Yet their world possessed a unique rhythm that has almost disappeared. Morning began with open windows and fresh air. Afternoon brought quiet streets and shaded porches. And evening invited entire neighbourhoods back outside. People recognised the songs of insects that appeared after sunset, the scent of flowers carried by a cooling breeze, and the distant flashes of lightning promising relief from another exhausting day. Nature was not something viewed through a window. It was an active part of everyday life, influencing every decision from sunrise until bedtime. Many elderly people who later experienced modern air conditioning admitted they appreciated its comfort but still remembered those slower summer evenings with surprising warmth. They spoke about neighbours who knew one another by name, children inventing games beneath streetlights, and families sitting together long after dinner simply because the outside air had finally become pleasant. Those memories remind us that difficult circumstances sometimes created stronger connections between people. They relied on conversation instead of television, shared porches instead of separate living rooms, and waited together for the weather to change. The invention of air conditioning solved countless problems and undoubtedly improved millions of lives. It reduced illness, increased productivity, protected vulnerable people during dangerous heat waves, and made modern cities possible. Few inventions have quietly influenced daily life so completely. Yet remembering the world before it existed allows us to appreciate something even greater than technology itself. It reminds us that human beings have always possessed an incredible ability to endure hardship while continuing to hope for something better. The story of summer before air conditioning is ultimately not a story about discomfort. It is a story about resilience, creativity, family, and the quiet determination that carried generations through challenges they could never completely escape. Their perseverance built the foundation for the comfortable world we enjoy today. And for that reason alone, their forgotten summers deserve to be remembered long after the heat itself has faded into history. If we could step back in time for just one summer day, the first thing we would probably notice would be the silence. There would be no constant hum of cooling systems outside office buildings, no air-conditioned buses releasing streams of cold air each time their doors opened, and no chilled supermarkets offering an escape from the heat. Instead, the sounds of summer would be far more natural. Birds would sing during the cooler hours of the morning before, falling quiet beneath the midday sun. Cicadas would fill the afternoon with their steady chorus, while the distant rumble of thunder would instantly capture everyone's attention. Rain was never just rain. It was hope. Children would rush to windows. Farmers would look toward the darkening sky with relief, and families would smile at the thought of cooler air arriving after the storm passed. The smell of rain on dry ground became one of the most welcome scents of the entire season. Those moments reminded people that nature always changed eventually. even after the longest and hottest days. Summer also taught people to appreciate small comforts in ways that are easy to overlook today. Sitting beneath the shade of a large tree could feel as refreshing as entering a modern building. This air conditioning, a glass of cool well water, a breeze flowing through an open doorway, or simply placing tired feet into a bucket of cold water after hours of work could completely change a person's mood. Comfort was measured in small victories rather than perfect conditions. Looking through old family memories, historians often find that people rarely complained about these routines. Instead, they simply accepted them as part of life. They understood that every season brought its own difficulties and its own rewards. Spring meant planting, autumn meant harvesting, winter demanded endurance against the cold, and summer required patience beneath the relentless sun. That acceptance shaped a mindset that valued resilience over convenience. Perhaps that is why the history of life before air conditioning remains so fascinating. It reminds us that while technology has transformed the world beyond recognition, the qualities that truly carried humanity forward have always remained the same. Hope, adaptability, kindness toward neighbours, and the determination to keep moving forward despite discomfort were just as important then as they are today. Every cool room we enjoy is built upon generations of people who endured conditions we can scarcely imagine, quietly proving that the greatest source of human strength has never been found inside a machine, but within the people who refused to give up no matter how hot the summer became. As the years passed, memories of those sweltering summers slowly turned into stories told by grandparents sitting beside younger generations who had never experienced such a world. Children listened with disbelief as they heard about sleeping on rooftops, carrying heavy blocks of ice home before they melted, and waking before sunrise, simply to finish chores before the unbearable afternoon heat arrived. To those children, it sounded almost like another century from a distant history book. Yet for the older generation, those memories remained vivid. They could still remember the feeling of warm wooden floors beneath their feet, the sound of a hand fan moving through the air, and the relief that came when the first cool breeze drifted through an open window after sunset. Those experiences shaped the way they viewed comfort for the rest of their lives. They wasted less, appreciated more, and rarely took simple conveniences for granted, because they knew exactly what life had been like without them. Historians often say that progress is easiest to recognize when we compare ordinary moments rather than extraordinary events. A century ago, an office worker might have spent an entire afternoon struggling to concentrate in a room filled with heat and humidity. Today, people can work comfortably inside climate-controlled buildings without giving the temperature a second thought. Patients recovering in hospitals, students sitting in classrooms, travellers waiting in airports, and families sleeping peacefully. At night, all benefit from an invention that quietly changed almost every aspect of modern society. Yet, despite these remarkable advances, one important truth has remained unchanged. Human beings continue adapting to whatever challenges their time presents. Previous generations learned to live without cool air, because they had no alternative. Our generation faces different problems, but the same determination still exists. Every era asks people to overcome obstacles using the knowledge and technology available to them. That continuous effort is what pushes history forward. When we look back at the summers before air conditioning, we are not simply remembering a world that was hotter or less comfortable. We are remembering millions of ordinary people whose patience, creativity, and resilience allowed communities to flourish despite difficult conditions. Their quiet perseverance deserves just as much recognition as any famous invention, because without the strength of those everyday people, the modern world could never have been built. Their story reminds us that history is not only written by inventors or leaders, but also by countless families who endured, adapted, and kept moving forward one summer day at a time. Perhaps the most surprising lesson hidden within this story is that comfort has always changed the way people think. Before air conditioning, nobody expected to feel cool during the hottest part of summer. Discomfort was accepted as temporary, just another season that would eventually pass. People planned weddings in cooler months, held outdoor gatherings after sunset, and understood that the rhythm of life naturally slowed whenever extreme heat arrived. Today, we often expect every room to remain the same, comfortable temperature throughout the year. That change seems small, yet it represents one of the greatest transformations in everyday human history. It affected education, healthcare, business, architecture, transportation, and even the places where millions of people chose to build their lives. Cities that once struggled through unbearable summers eventually became thriving centres of industry because technology made year-round comfort possible. Looking back through old photographs, there is one detail that appears again and again. Faces covered with sweat are often still smiling. Families continued celebrating birthdays. Children chased one another through dusty streets. Musicians played on warm evenings, and neighbours laughed together beneath shaded porches. The heat was real, but so was the joy of everyday life. Those people refused to let difficult weather prevent them from finding happiness. Their example reminds us that while technology can improve our surroundings, it is our attitude that often determines how we experience them. The generations who lived before modern cooling understood that every hardship eventually ended. They waited for the evening breeze, welcomed every rainstorm, and celebrated the arrival of autumn with genuine gratitude. Those seasonal changes felt meaningful because they had earned them through months of patience. In many ways, they noticed nature more carefully than we do today. They could predict weather from the sky, recognize changing winds, and appreciate simple moments that modern life sometimes encourages us to overlook. Their world moved at a slower pace, but it also created memories deeply connected to the changing seasons. As this chapter of history draws closer to its conclusion, one message remains clear. The story of summer before air conditioning is not simply about surviving heat. It is about humanity's endless ability to adapt without losing hope. Long before machines made life easier, ordinary people relied on wisdom, determination, and one another. They faced every sunrise knowing another hot day awaited them. Yet they continued working, laughing, raising families, and building the future. Their quiet courage became part of the foundation upon which modern comfort was built. reminding us that every convenience we enjoy today carries with it the unseen efforts of countless generations who endured far more than we can easily imagine. As we come closer to the end of this journey, it is worth remembering that history is filled with inventions that quietly changed the world without attracting the attention they deserved. Air conditioning is one of those rare inventions. It did not simply make people feel cooler. It reshaped economies, influenced migration, transformed architecture, improved public health, and changed the daily routines of billions of people. Yet before any of that happened, countless generations accepted the summer heat as an unavoidable part of life. They measured time differently. Dawn was the most valuable part of the day because it offered cool air and renewed energy. Noon belonged to shade and rest whenever possible, while evening became the time for conversation, family, and community. Nature dictated the schedule, and people adapted with remarkable flexibility. Even today, many traditional cultures continue following these patterns because they remain practical in hot climates. Historians often point out that resilience grows strongest when people learn to adapt rather than complain. The families who lived before air conditioning certainly wished for cooler days, but they also developed countless ways to make life more bearable. They planted vines to shade windows, built homes with high ceilings, carried water wherever they travelled, and taught each new generation the simple skills needed to survive another summer. These lessons were rarely written in books. They were passed from parents to children through everyday experience, becoming part of family life without anyone realizing they were preserving history. Looking at the modern world, it is astonishing how completely these routines have disappeared. Many people now spend entire summer days moving from one cooled building to another, barely noticing the temperature outside. Technology has given us a level of comfort that previous generations could scarcely imagine. Yet the old stories remain valuable because they remind us that comfort should never be taken for granted. Behind every cool classroom, every comfortable hospital, every quiet office, and every peaceful night's sleep lies the long history of people who endured a much harsher world while dreaming of something better. Their determination inspired generations of inventors, builders, and engineers to keep searching for solutions until those dreams finally became reality. In the end, the history of summer before air conditioning is not really about heat at all. It is about the remarkable journey of human progress. It is the story of ordinary people facing ordinary problems with extraordinary courage, proving once again that humanity has always possessed an incredible ability to adapt, innovate, and build a better future for the generations that would one day follow in their footsteps. In the end, perhaps the greatest gift of studying history is not learning how different the past was, but discovering how similar people have always been. The men, women, and children who lived through those sweltering summers dreamed of the very same things we dream about today. They wanted their families to be safe, their homes to be comfortable, and tomorrow to be a little better than yesterday. They celebrated small victories, found joy in simple moments, and refused to let difficult circumstances take away their hope. Every generation inherited the world left behind by those who came before, adding its own ideas, inventions, and determination until life gradually became easier. Air conditioning was not the result of a single brilliant moment. It was the final answer to a problem that humanity had struggled with for thousands of years. Lebach. It is impossible not to admire the quiet strength of those ordinary people. They worked beneath a blazing sun, rested under the shade of old trees, welcomed every cooling breeze with gratitude, and faced each new summer with remarkable resilience. Their story reminds us that true progress is built step by step, often through the patience and perseverance of people whose names are never recorded in history books. The next time you walk into a cool room on a scorching afternoon, take just a moment to appreciate how extraordinary that simple feeling truly is. Behind that refreshing air lies the experience of countless generations who imagined a more comfortable future but never had the chance to enjoy it themselves. Because of their endurance, their creativity, and the lessons they passed from one generation to the next, the modern world became possible. Their forgotten summers were not lived in vain. They became part of the foundation upon which our everyday lives now stand. And perhaps that is the most beautiful lesson of all. History is not only a collection of kings, inventions, and great battles. It is also the quiet story of ordinary people who woke up every morning, faced whatever challenges the day brought, cared for those they loved, and slowly shaped a better world for people they would never meet. As the evening breeze finally settles over our story and the last light of the summer sun fades beyond the horizon, you can leave this journey with a deeper appreciation for both the hardships of the past and the comforts of the present. Sleep peacefully, knowing that every cool breath of air we enjoy today is a silent tribute to the resilience of those who came before us. Good night, and until our next journey through history, rest well.